My name is Jackie Hookiemaw Witt. It's Jackimaw-Witt. I am First Nation. I am from Treaty 9 territory. Right now, I live in North Bay, Ontario. I was living in Oakville before to do my culinary studies. It's a combination of things, what I heard from my father and from my great-grandmother and my grandmother, and what I've been reading when I did research on archives. Well, for me, because it's very personal, like the persons that I heard from these stories are from my father, my grandmother, and my father's, you could see he's my cousin as well. And when they share their stories, it's very dramatic, very emotional, and they really wanted their story to be heard because it involves their loved one that passed away, and they wanted accountability. They wanted to know like answers, like why did this happen? It's a story about the child that died, and it's a story about the children that died when they ran away together. The residential school was St. Anne's Residential School, and it's situated in Fort Albany, Ontario. Yeah, I think there's like many voices because I'm sharing a story from my father, and also from my grandmother, and also my grandmother had a sister, and she was from that other family whose child went missing, who died at St. Anne Residential School. So and it's like the family are related. They're the ones that lost their children at St. Anne's. So there's like family genealogy. So it's like I'm a third generation, like when you look at the background of the family in question. Well, I know like when I listen to stories, um, they were taken away by a ship, like it was contracted from Hudson's Bay Company. And my elderly friend told me they called it a crying children's ship, because he said whenever it came and left, you could hear the children cry as they were departing from Ottawapisket River, going to Fort Albany to go to St. Anne's. So that's what they call that ship, and I have a photo that I can include. Well, there's what I hear is like they were child that were living under like threatening conditions, a lot of threat, and a lot of secrecy, like nuns telling them don't talk about what happened to the boys, and even when there's officials involved, it seems like a big cover-up, that you're not supposed to know the truth. They want to bury the truth, but the truth has to be told, what actually happened. What I heard, like my dad spoke to one of the friends that spoke with the friends. So the planning, how they went about it, was that they said, we'll leave at nighttime when everybody's sleeping. And they would save their food, and they snuck into the kitchen and they collected some bread, and that's what they took with them, like whatever they could find, and they saved it for their journey to leave the building. And also what I heard was that when there was no availability of transportation being available, like there was perhaps like a dog team, but at that time they went away to Musini, probably to do visits with the bishop. So when there's no dog team, then that might have been the opportunity for the boys to run away, because they might know there might be nobody to go after them when it's not there. You know, one of my cousins, he was an elder. While he was still alive, he was reaching out for help because he was saying that he had a sister that died at residential school, and he wanted some official means to open the case, and I reached out to people, but I didn't have much luck. And what he told me was that his sister, I guess they were playing, and my father also confirmed that. He said we were just playing, we were just like throwing balls at each other. And somehow the baseball, it hit the window of the building, and it crashed, and it cracked the window. And the brother came running out, and they grabbed that girl inside the building. And my dad said they heard like a sound of splashing, like real sounds of somebody being beaten, and they heard her screams. Like he said, they were like in deep agony, her screams, and he said they were standing outside the building, and he said I peeked, and then he was quiet after. And he said there was silence after. They didn't hear that girl scream. And then later, he said they were told that she got sick and that she passed away. And that's all he said. And I didn't really know what to say. I was visiting him that afternoon. He was sitting outside, and my brother opened the window, and he said, "Oh, Dad, a lawyer phoned here. They said you witness or you know about that girl that died at St. Anne's, that got killed." And my brother has schizophrenia, so when I heard that, I just thought he's in his world. So I just said to my dad, what's happening with him? And that's when he was quiet, and then he told me what happened. And then I remember we went to church together, and I saw his friend, he's our cousin as well, the one whose sister died. And then when at the church, where you're at the part where you shake hands, my dad reached out to his friend, but his friend wouldn't take his hand. And so after the church, I asked my dad, I guess he's upset with you. And he said, you know, I couldn't talk to the lawyer because I cannot take God to court, he said. And I told him, well, these people are just human beings that did that. You don't have to be afraid. And so I tried to explain to his friend that he was a little boy, that he's scared, you know, and I told him, you're both elderly, and try to make peace with each other. And so Benoit held out his hand, and they shook hands inside. And then after, like, my dad, when he was passing, I noticed that he was afraid. Like, he had caught a terrible disease from the hospital. And so his health went up and down. He went on a bad trip. And then when we had the teleconference with him, he said, am I being punished? What did I do wrong? And I said, no, Dad, you caught a very deadly disease, and your body was fighting an antibiotic, so you went on a bad trip. And he said, thank you, my daughter, for telling me that. And that's where I see that how traumatized he's been from that incident. And he was sort of quiet, and he kept to himself. And sometimes I think whether he would have been more open with us as a family, you know, because it was like he was just living in his world, like traumatized. And there's other things too, like it wasn't only him, like there's other family members that went. I also, like, when I was trying to understand this, what's happening, what happened, I was reading, like, I'm glad that our people did some research, like there was an article, an interview that was done to my great-grandmother, Sarah, from Ojibwe Agriculture Center. And that's where I saw her words, and it struck me. She said, my daughter, she lost her son at the residential school. He was killed. And she said, the people at residential school are responsible for what happened, because they should have looked after the children properly. And she said, Sarah said, my daughter was in so much pain after what happened when she lost her son, my grandson, she said. And I could see, like, I was reading in other sources, like sometimes you find things in newspaper when this is happening with St. Anne's. You see how the system, the colonial system, they tried everything to fabricate their own version of the truth by using the tools that give them power, like the RCMP and the priest and the bishop. And the bishop to call these kids the deserters for running away, like blaming these children rather than trying to understand why they were running away. And I think for me that's a powerful word for somebody like a bishop to say they're disorders. You know, it's like, I will not be bothered, because I've heard of other stories where non-Aboriginal students that were there when they ran away. The next day there was Mother Superior, the priests, you know, they were there with the snowmobile and the other antique mode of transportation. And these kids belonged to Hudson's Bay Company, you know, their father was a manager. It just seems there was a difference of treatment of who was to be searched for right away when somebody's missing. And that's what I find astonishing, and also that when I read the report or a story that there was a doctor that did his annual visit to St. Anne's, and that's when he heard about the boys that perished. And then when he asked the priest there, how come you didn't report this to the officials? He said, well, I did report it to the bishop in Mosinee. And the bishop didn't contact the RCMP, and all he said is they're disorders. And then a year later, the top man in Ottawa heard about this incident, and then he formulated a committee, all men, like there was the principal, the RCMP, and himself, and they call it inquiry. but it wasn't very beneficial for the family because their report contradicted to what the family said, that the kids were beaten and threatened, and they just didn't want the story to be told. That's what I'm finding. And it's not just residential school. It's so systematic. Like they also talked about, not in this St. Anne's, but what I see happening when I talk about like institutional like racism, how systematic it is. Like when this Dr. Bryce, when he saw what was happening at the hospital or how the Native people are treated. Back home, there's a doctor that got his license suspended from the Ontario College of Doctors, and he says it's because he was blowing the whistle to how Native people are not getting proper medical treatment. So I see the ongoing issues, how Native people, like what we go through. It's like there's an apartheid system where we're treated as low class while the others will benefit from the system and we continue to suffer. That's the legacy that I still see happening. And also it has such big impacts like lateral violence. Like I worked in offices, I experienced lateral violence from my colleagues. And if there's an Aboriginal person working with Health Canada, there was so much lateral violence. I couldn't understand it. I was just doing my work, helping vulnerable children, you know, and also with our own like community members doing to each other, sabotaging each other's work. I think it's the trauma, and some people call it denial, but I think for me, when I read about psychology, people are frozen in that terror, and they cannot see, it's not objective. So I think that's where perhaps where we might be, maybe not always correct to say denial. I think it's just the trauma, how complex it has become. So it's really hard to unravel so that we can maintain more healthy relations of respect to one another in our communities. And also to reconcile, I think also when people talk about reconciliation, they have these, when there's a conflict of race relations, they always automatically bring a session where they call it cultural competency. For me, I think it's politically dangerous. I think you're watering down the colonialism, how deep it is. I think you really need to examine the policy that's genocidal to correct the situation, rather than a non-Aboriginal for competency to say, oh, I didn't know that it's in your, not in your culture. You know, I think it's too weak. It has to be more systematic. It has to be to the heart of this ongoing problem. Well, it's very complex. Like if you look at it psychologically, politically, economically, when you know all the actors involved, like Hudson's Bay Company and the fur trade, you know, it's all power imbalance, and that's my biggest fear, because you see nowadays when there's resource development coming to our communities, there's a big protest right now across Canada, you know, because people are saying enough is enough, what you're doing to our water, to our resources. You know, you're polluting our water. We depend on the land. It's sustainable for us. It's our culture. It's our identity. You know, that's why I want to look at it holistically, because I also think part of the reason why this residential school is rooted in this belief that if there's no more Aboriginal people, then we don't have to, they don't have to talk about the land anymore because we don't exist anymore. It's just some imagination. So I think they tried everything to for us to assimilate, to disappear, so that there would be no more question for land claims, because it's this what sustains power from the resources coming from our traditional territories. And also, when you look at it also psychologically, what I found, like when I lost somebody else from suicide, and we had a big emergency back home, reporters came and lots of artists came, non-Aboriginals from overseas. They said, we want to help, you know. And I was like I lived there, so I met with many, and also I was working in the school while this was going on. I was in high school teaching, and I couldn't believe, like the artists that came there, like they told me, well, you have to be positive, you have to have hope. Like, how can they tell me this after I lost somebody to suicide and she was a student, you know? When they told me that, it was just like a stab in the heart, like I'm not supposed to talk about her anymore, or how it's contributing, you know, to other kids when they did that too. And I think that was the hardest for me, when these well-meaning artists thought they were helping, they were actually making things worse for me, because I was trying to do art activities with kids, because I didn't want that we lose more kids. And I worked with my husband, he's an educator as well. I worked with elders and other people that wanted to help us work with the youth. And we had them to art, and through the art we saw what messages they were saying, what was happening in their life. And we took them aside, and we talked, we cried, we shared, and they're okay. And I think that's what needed to happen, is some acknowledgement that they needed to be heard, and that they needed to feel that somebody cares for them, you know. And so these were the kind of programs that we were trying to design in our community as private individuals. I wasn't associated within the official system. I volunteered my time. But sometimes there were grants available where we could do other activities outside the system, because I couldn't see it offering something that could help, because there was so much chaos, trauma, and lateral violence. So I wanted to make sure that nobody else passes away, you know. So these were the things that I noticed. And these people don't know, like the artists, what damage they can do to the communities when they don't want to really understand how deep it is. Like, they have to look within themselves. They have to save themselves first before they come to me and say, I'm here to save you. That they have to look at themselves first, their privileges, you know. And you cannot tell somebody you have to be positive when they have no drinking water, they have poor housing, and poor health, and low standard of education system. And that's what I saw too when I was researching with St. Anne's. There was a correspondence with Hudson's Bay and the fur trade and the bishop. They were talking about like education, and one of the things that struck me was when the bishop said, well, half-breeds, we'll teach them math and English, and the others, the Indians will not know this for now. And I thought, what kind of education system is this? And then when I spoke to my dad, he said, well, at that time, we were only learning religion. And he said, I wish that I had learned English. I wish that I had known math, because when fur trade was there, I would have been able to argue with them when we were doing business deals with my fur. So you see, it's a deep history of fur trade, you know, how they negotiated with the church, like to use the ship to pick up the children, and designing the curriculum, like there's business entity in there as well, like it's very complex. And I think that's what we need to remember, what reconciliation, they have to really accept what's happening and really make political changes with teeth to stop treating Aboriginal people like low-class citizens. I think because there was suicide involved, and I was searching, like but I saw there was other inquests that were done already, and like in Thunder Bay, or children that died when they were kept in welfare system, social services agencies. I just saw a pattern there. We know this master, we can never dismantle the house of our master. And sure enough, when I saw his comments, it's like the family, like in general, Native people are blamed. Like when something terrible happens, we're the victims. We're being blamed. Like it's like we brought this upon ourselves. It's like this bishop saying they were the deserters and he didn't do anything about it. And that's how I feel the justice system. It's like we're dropped, and I think this needs to stop. I think this whole situation now, it's all about abuse of human rights, you know, the housing, the education, and drinking water. Like it's about human rights now, the abuse we go through. So I think that's what Canada needs to look at, what they're doing to Aboriginal people, because they pretend now to be the human rights champions, and but it just seems the world, like it seems it's human nature to hurt one another for power. Like it's almost like when you look at European history with Holocaust, you know. When I traveled, we went to Budapest and we went to Munich, and I visited these Holocaust centers. And each wall, each panel had an expression of human right abuse for security. And each example, it was like what we're going through in Canada. I cried when I saw it, and I thought, my God, it's not only the Jews, it's also Aboriginal people. Our security, our right to security, like it's violated when we don't have proper housing or proper drinking water, or when economic system doesn't really help Aboriginal people to get jobs and training. There's a deep gap with socioeconomic, you know, we have the highest unemployment, and we don't have enough like skills. And they bring in immigrants when they feel there's shortage of jobs for whatever sectors for employment. So that's what I see. So if they really want like reconciliation, I think they really need to listen to our leaders that are sitting in Ottawa, that speak with their people from across Canada. When they keep saying, well, this is what's wrong, please, like they need to listen. They need to really make systematic changes. Then I will truly believe that it's a great country to live in. But until now, I don't think so.